Well, thank you for joining us today for this Life Project webinar. My name is Paul Jones. I manage the National AgrAbility Project, which is headquartered at Purdue University. And our topic today is on the importance of regenerative organic agriculture practices. Our presenter today, Nathanael Gonzales-Siemens from the Rodale Institute. I mentioned that this is a Life Project webinar, and Life Project stands for Legacy Innovation Farming Economics. It is a collaborative effort between Legacy Farming and Health Group, People's Foundation, and the National AgrAbility Project. The Life Project is part of USDA's outreach and assistance for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers and veteran farmers and ranchers through the 2501 grant program. Its main objectives: to assist socially disadvantaged or veteran farmers in owning and successfully operating farms and ranches, also to improve participation by those farmers and ranchers in USDA programs, to help build relationships with USDA's offices, also to provide agriculture-related information, including technical assistance and techniques to those populations, and also provide agricultural education, particularly for beginning farmers, for those in the socially disadvantaged communities. For those that are not familiar with AgrAbility, we are sponsored by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We focus on issues related to disability in agriculture. Every one of the AgrAbility projects around the country is a partnership between a land-grant university and at least one nonprofit disability services organization. There are currently 21 state projects around the country, plus the National AgrAbility Project. Again, that's at Purdue University in the Breaking New Ground Resource Center. And our partners on that grant include Goodwill of the Finger Lakes, Osteoarthritis Action Alliance, AgriSafe Network, Colorado State University, and Washington State University. You can find out a lot more about AgrAbility at the agrability.org website, including over 140 other archived webinars that you can view at your convenience. I want to introduce our presenter. Nathanael Gonzales-Siemens is California Organic Consultant for the Rodale Institute. He returned to his roots in the spirit of discovery that first brought him back to farming after a decade of teaching in inner city Los Angeles and in China, and working for criminal justice reform on the West Coast. Nathaniel spent his undergrad years in plants, studying plant genetics and biology at UCLA, and has a teaching credential for CSU Los Angeles. He grew up on a small farm in California's San Joaquin Valley, founded two businesses there with his family. The first, now run by his brothers, focused on food justice, food justice and sovereignty. And the second, operated by his wife, strives to implement regenerative farming practices and equip and empower traditionally underrepresented groups. So at this time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn things over to Nathaniel.
Great. Thank you, Paul, for the introduction. All right. So like you said, my name's Nathaniel. I'm a farmer out here, first and foremost, in California. And I work with the Rodale Institute. My farming situation, definitely, I want to tell you a little bit about myself before I get into regenerative, because this definitely informs my understanding of the question of regenerative and how it's different from organic. So I'm a farmer. I consider myself a farmer, but I'm a farmer without land. I lease all of my land here because back before I went to college, my family, my father, who was a fourth generation California farmer, lost his land, lost our family's land to bankruptcy as part of the get big or get out push in through the USDA. So the U.S. Governmental policy, I think, is a paramount issue in farming, and it's something that impacted me directly, impacted my family. So in getting back into farming, that's always been a consideration: is what is a resilient system, and how can we build farms that are independent of global shifts in commodity prices and climate change and the other whims that we just can't control. So a big part of what I see my job in farming right now is to address those issues that and the many other issues that my father and my grandfather and great grandfathers were all complicit in ushering into the farming system that we have today. I certainly don't blame my grandfather for choosing to get rid of horses and start farming with a tractor, but it was still a decision that he made, and it's a decision that I'm dealing with today, and more than me, that my kids and my grandkids will be dealing with in the future. So part of that shift, part of the answer, not part of the answer, the entire answer, I think, is that system that I've been kind of inferring that my father, this patriarchal system that was just, single individuals within the context of their family and their community were making decisions that impacted everyone. So our decision as a family now has been to include the entire group of family members. So my wife makes most of the farming decisions, does most of the farming, and my teenage daughter operates our farming equipment. And we're hoping to create a more resilient family farm by sharing the ownership of the decisions. At the end of the day, I think that the operating principle that I have is that diversity is the answer, not just as we'll see in soil health, but also in family and farm health. Okay, so that's my background. Today I work with the Rodale Institute. That's my day job. The Rodale Institute, as many people are familiar with, actually, you might even have gone to our booth at the AgrAbility conference just this last winter in Madison. We set up a booth there for not the first time. It's I think that Rodale's been active in AgrAbility for a number of years before I came, especially through Justin Barclay, who probably many of you know through his work with the Veteran Farmer Coalition and the Veteran Farmer Training Program that he runs through the Rodale Institute, based out of Pennsylvania. So I had the pleasure of getting to attend that conference. I may have met some of you there. It was eye-opening for me, the tremendous amount of resources and thought that have gone into equipping socially disadvantaged farmers, veteran farmers, and farmers with other abilities to work and cooperate in agriculture. So Rodale's been active in that space and been active in the organic space for a long time. But regenerative is something new. So where did it come from? It's a lot. It's a complicated story, as most things are. But I really liked Robin Wall Kimmerer's description in Braiding Sweetgrass, which I would recommend to absolutely everyone to read, where she describes what I would call the indigenous roots of science. That there's a long historical precedent for observation, for trial and error, and that those roots, we can all access those roots very pragmatically. As children we all do, but as adults, especially Western adults, we have turned off some of those components. So it was really a fun description that she had in once again Braiding Sweetgrass. So that's obviously where the idea of a functional farming system, agricultural system comes from, is from all of our past. In a more maybe modern, but maybe more esoteric sense too, there's a quote that I've appreciated from Liz Carlisle, the author of Lentil Underground. She was asked by someone about what's her definition of regenerative, and she just described it simply as that it's a healing of relationships. We have a lot of relationships to heal, whether they be with between components of our farming systems, or they between people. But the healing of relationships is what is the basis, the nexus of regenerative theory. Stop myself just for a second. I'm just checking the questions in chat. Paul, if you want to jump in, I have the screen generally turned off, the main screen turned off. So if you want to interrupt me with questions at any point, that's fine. I imagine there probably won't be until we get into the meat of this in just a couple more minutes.
We do have one question so far. I don't know if you want to address it now or wait, but I'll mention it to you.
Sure.
It says, can you recommend measures you think? Yeah, can you recommend measures you think will need to be covered in the upcoming federal farm bill for 2023? What can we advocate for to our legislators, both federal and state? So you can either address that or wait, or whichever you prefer.
That's a great question. I'm going to maybe save that for the end. There's a next steps kind of component at the end. I think that will fit in there. And just keep on, if you ever want to jump in, Paul, or anyone else, if you want to post a question, just jump in. So, like I said, there's a indigenous roots to this regenerative idea of regenerative farming. There's an intuitive component to it as well, where most of us kind of understand that a sustainable model, we're not functioning in a sustainable model anymore. There's a tremendous amount of documentation and awareness in our society of the ills of environmental ills that are related to farming or that would impact farming. So that zeitgeist of awareness is unique to our digital culture, and it's something that is closely related to this the regenerative movement, because organic is an old school style of implementing an idea. It came from farmers. Were working together. It was very collaborative. The organic movement is very closely related, I would say, to the food movement, to lots of great awareness and the great new restaurants that we have in every little town across the U.S. But it was a grassroots type of movement, whereas the regenerative movement has almost come from the cloud, as it were. There's movies out there, the Kiss the Ground, there's Biggest Little Farm, there's documentaries out there, and they all have fed into this idea that we're not doing things quite right, and we need to improve on, especially our farming practices, that organic and specifically is not enough. So that public awareness also translates into brand awareness. So as opposed to a farmer-driven movement, which organic has been, the regenerative movement has been a very brand-driven change. And obviously, there's tremendous strength to that, in that there's a breadth of awareness among the consumers, and there's commensurate purchasing capacity in there. But there's also, there's also a lot of risk of greenwashing and of corporate co-opting of these ideas. So that kind of leads to the place where that's why I'm here. That's why Rodale is here most specifically. So Rodale recognized this along with Patagonia, Dr. Bronner's, and a few other kind of industry leaders, I would say, kind of in the natural farming area, and came up with the idea of a regenerative organic certification. And this was a few years back. They formed the group of thinkers kind of came together and formed the Regenerative Organic Alliance, turned it into a nonprofit 501c3 status. And the Regenerative Organic Alliance was tasked with writing a set of standards around regenerative organic certification. So, and those were specifically to start with organic. Organic is the baseline, and they would add to it. So this is organic plus, this is more than organic. So what does that constitute? What specifically is different between the regenerative organic frameworks and the just straight organic frameworks? So the regenerative organic frameworks consist of three main pillars. There's social fairness, a soil health pillar, and an animal welfare pillar. And those are all three in addition to the existing NOP frameworks about organics. The biggest ones, and there's a whole bunch of details for each of them, but the biggest ones, I think, for the social fairness is there's one, the living wage, and biggest might be maybe a better way of putting it is the most challenging aspects and maybe the most important aspects that are going to need to change on any given organic farm. So social fairness is living wage. So workers need to be paid more, and that's calculated based on the MIT published recommendations, and a right to organize. Like I said, there's a bunch of other ones, but those two are pretty significant shifts in mindset for most farmers in North America, and even for coming from a state like California, where there's a tremendous amount of legislation that's already kind of dictating what social fairness should look like. It's still been a challenge for the farmers that we've seen out here that are getting regenerative organic certification. So for social fairness, living wage, right to organize, some more stipulations within overtime, work hours per week, those sort of things, age allowances. And then soil health. Soil health is really the center of all this. Is definitely why Rodale got involved. And it came from critiques around the organic movement, especially components like the hydroponics. There's a big pushback within the organic community on hydroponics when that was allowed in the NOP. And other things as well, the tillage, no-till is definitely having a moment right now, and that's been a big piece of the kind of pushing to do something more than organic. So tillage reduction is explicitly described within the soil health pillar, and crop rotation is also specifically described. There's a certain number of different crops that are required in a crop rotation in order to get to meet the soil health pillar requirements. Any questions so far?
And one other comment. It says, my opinion to answering your question would be primarily in establishing honeybee sanctuary regions across the continental United States that are completely free of harmful chemicals that are detrimental to their hives. I realize that my opinion may be controversial, but we need honeybees. And then another
that one actually.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say another that just came in was how do you see this impacting small farms, I guess, in terms of what you just shared about the regenerative standards?
Sure. Okay, so the honeybee question actually can fit in right here, right where we're at in the soil health pillar. There is a requirement within the for rock regenerative organic certification. For rock compliance, there is a requirement that against neonicotinoids across the board. So there are more stringent pesticide prohibitions than the organic standards, and that's with this expressed and stated concern of honeybee health, of pollinator health. So the and it was an interesting actually way that was actually standardized and kind of written into the pillar was that they utilized the Xerxes Society, which if you're not familiar with them, they're tremendously knowledgeable and just great organization. I've had great relationships with the Xerxes Societies. If you're not connected with your local person, I definitely recommend that. They're tons of fun, just smart people. And so what regenerative organic certification did is it tied in the use of pesticides into Xerxes Society's recommended usages and applications and rates. So, which, like I say, is much more stringent than the organics or the EPA's, and it's specifically tied into pollinator health. So, in terms of honeybee regions, I love that idea of having them. I'm a beekeeper myself. We have almond trees here, so we need bees here. So, and we keep our bees in the orchard year round, and we're always thinking of different cover crops that they would like to. They would kind of broaden their forage capacity. So that's the honeybee health is definitely written into the rock standards, and it's something that I've really enjoyed seeing in there. In terms of the small farms component, that one would actually. How has this impacted small farms? And my concern, just personally, like I said right at the beginning, is that since this is coming from, really is driven by large organizations. Patagonia was on the very first meeting with kind of like designing what the goals of a regenerative certification would look like. And Patagonia is a multinational corporation, and it's almost by definition, it's going to be hard for smaller family farms, small acreage, the global South, generally speaking, to be integrated into this. But the three pillars, so social fairness, soil health, and animal welfare. The first one, social fairness, whether you like it or not, this was actually derived from fair trade. So if you are already certified fair trade, you can come into the ROC certification. You apply for ROC certification and basically skip the auditing process, the component related to social fairness, because you're already fair trade certified. What that means is that it's the ethos of the social fairness components and the specific line items within that pillar are already focused on small farmers, and already focused on collectives in Central America, on individual family farms, 1 acre, 2 acre plots in India. So it's in a sense, the social fairness is actually more challenging, and this has been my experience, personal experience. It's more challenging to get certified ROC as a North American farm, large farm, than it would be for a small family farm. So hopefully that holds true, and kind of in the next step parts, I'm hoping to kind of elicit some of those thoughts of, how do we all, keep this idea of regenerative organic, how do we keep that within are within the best or within our own priorities, within our own ideologies. Sorry, my son was bringing me a phone call from my wife. She's gonna have to wait. Distracted there for a moment. So I'm gonna jump down to the last one, animal welfare pillar here. The animal welfare pillar obviously only applies to farmers who are keeping animals. So most farms with row crops, things like that, will only have to meet the social health pillar and the social soil health pillar and the social fairness pillar. So the animal welfare component is unique to egg laying operations and beef cattle operations and fleece and things like that. And the animal welfare is definitely very conscientiously builds upon the ideas that were started with the organic, especially the pasture component, the pasture rules of the organic code. So the idea that animals should always have access to grazing and to the outdoors. So it's very clearly stipulates that there are no restrictions on that. It clearly demarcates, how much light is allowed or disallowed. They have to have be allowed a certain amount of darkness as well, which, if you're familiar with egg laying operations, is a significant component of management criteria. Is how do you get them to lay more eggs by turning on the light more often for them, and then obvious things like humane slaughter and breed appropriateness for, based on your region, things like that. So that's the animal welfare pillar. The last kind of technical component of the regenerative organic certification that I want to talk about is an idea that they call continuous improvement. So within these three pillars, there's designated as three different tiers of compliance. The entry level tier they call bronze, the mid-level tier is silver, and then the obvious one is gold for the top one. And the gold one is really quite rigorous. I think a lot of farmers have come into this thing. We have a top, the most best farming operation in our region. We certainly are going to come in at gold, and that hasn't been the case. There have been, I don't know actually if anyone is certified at gold at this point in any area of agriculture. So it's really quite rigorous, which is good. It's aspirational certainly, but they also wrote into the protocols or the bylaws that any farm that enters into bronze has to, after 5 years, reach silver status. So they kind of codified this idea of improvement, which is really the essence of a regenerative idea. We go back to Liz Carlisle saying we need to heal relationships, or Robin Wall Kimmerer's idea about indigenous participation in agriculture. We all know that we need to make things better. We're here on Earth. We have a limited amount of time. We need to work to make things better for our kids. And it's interesting how they codified that, how they turned that into a specific requirement within the regenerative organic certification. Very unique to these standards-based certifications. So that's an interesting one. It's a fun one. It's also I'm not sure how it's going to play out. No one's been in the program for 5 years, so we'll see how that works out. But it is a component that I want to kind of highlight before kind of wrapping up the certification components. Any more questions before I move on to next steps?
We had a couple of fairly specific questions, and I don't know if you want to address these now or perhaps we could point people to some resources where they could find out more information, but I will go ahead and read them. One was, how do you control weeds with organic growing without pesticides? And another one, I raise bison on strip coal mine reclamation land. Have a few questions, but now we'll ask, how can I clear fence rows, weeds, grass off the fence, get rid of invasive plants without using chemicals, something organic to use? So again, fairly specific, but I'll throw those out to you.
All right. Weed control, just jump right into the weeds. I like it. So weed control has really always been organic's Achilles heel. And especially now with the kind of the rise of in awareness of no-till farming. So tillage has, especially in the Midwest, I haven't felt that too much here in California on the West Coast, but we have a nationwide team, and my colleagues in the Midwest are always daily complaining about how focused farmers are and public is on reducing tillage. And reducing tillage is obviously important, but it comes at a cost, and one of the main costs is the control of weeds. So in an organic farming context, weed control is primarily thought of as to be done through tillage. So you're making passes with specific pieces of equipment that will kill the weeds and keep your target plants, your cash crops alive. That said, from a more regenerative perspective, and certainly from a more holistic perspective as a consultant, if I'm going to come into a specific situation and to your bison ranch, for example, or your farm, the first thing I'm going to look at is not necessarily how you're tilling or what mechanical implements you're using to kill your weeds, but what is your crop rotation? Remember at the very beginning, I said the answer to everything is diversity. Diversity is the answer to everything, and that's especially true for weeds, because weeds are what's the saying? It's a plant growing in the wrong place, something like that. Someone's food that they misplaced. So it's diversity solves the problem of having the wrong plant in the wrong place, and it does that in an analog to how natural systems work. So in nature, we have tremendous amount of diversity, and we have a lack of monocrops. So there's no big stand of corn in nature, and there's also no big stand of thistle. It's solved through diversity. So when I would come to a farm, whether it's a pasture or an orchard or a field crop or what have you, the first thing I want to know is, how are they managing the diversity of plants out there? What is their crop rotation, and what is their cover crops? And when are those happening, and how are those happening? So that's where I like to get into the nitty-gritty details is around diversity. So specifically to answer those questions, back to those questions, a regenerative organic certification requires crop rotations, and it requires cover crops. So that would be the first thing I'd ask. It's, what did you plant in this pasture so that your bison, can get a complete nutritional diet? And how can we adjust that to increase the diversity, increase the nutrient value of the pasture, and decrease pernicious weeds? So, and those answers are out there. That's not my specialization, is in pastures, but the Savory Institute, we also have the Savory Institute does great work around that. And we also have a livestock specialist on our team who works on those components as well. Thanks for those questions. So next steps. And this goes back to 2023 legislation measures. So the USDA finally has decided to prioritize organic. So what do we do with that? And out in California, there's been a lot of legislative support for natural farming systems, for climate smart ag systems, and yeah, on a personal level, I try to obviously, if there's legislation to support, that's great. But I try to make the support that Rodale that comes through me out into California to make that personal as well, to make that support of individual farmers, to make it support of individual business owners and support of individual of politicians. So I should have said this right at the beginning, but I'm tremendously thankful to Tamika Peoples, who invited me to speak here, and just is one of the smartest people I know. And the more opportunities that I can give her, the more grants and relationships that I can steer towards her, the more that I know that this movement is in good hands. So when I talk about democratizing the movement, which is my step one is, how do we democratize this? How do we get everyone involved in this? You've got I'm sure that each of you have some really tremendous people that you're working alongside, and the more that you can pass them connections and involve them in talks like this, involve them in networking them for business purposes. Those are all the essence of a regenerative system. Those are big picture regenerative. That regenerates our society, which is going to regenerate our agricultural system. So I don't have specific measures that I would support. I don't have a platform to pass on, but I would definitely encourage each and all of you to be involved in your local politics, especially as it pertains to climate smart agriculture and the financial support of that. It's kind of an obvious statement. So democratizing the movement, step one. Step two is adopting best practices. So the regenerative standards are an attempt to have a very broadly applicable set of practices that can be adopted on farms around the entire globe. It's an absurd attempt, and it's an absurd goal, but at the same time, it's kind of a North Star that we can look to. And so my job as a consultant with the Rodale Institute on the West Coast is, I work primarily with orchards and figure out how they can get cover crops on the orchard floor and connect them with farmers that are already doing that, and custom operators who have these specific pieces of equipment that can no-till in diverse cover crops. So adopting best practices really where the rubber meets the road, and your local organizations like Farm Links and Extension, obviously, and sometimes the organizations just don't exist. We started up about 2 years ago. We started up an equipment sharing co-op in our region here. It was based on the idea that I'd seen of a co-op I'd seen in Washington State. But all we did is we got someone to donate a really small seed plot no-till drill, and it cost about $5,000 new. So it wasn't outside of the question. We even toyed with the idea of a few farmers buying it collectively, and then just started up an old-fashioned telephone tree thing where whoever wanted to use it next, they just call up and figure it out. And now it's turned into a nonprofit 501c3, blah 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 blah. We started out with a fiscal sponsor, and we kind of went through the evolution of that. But sometimes just an old-fashioned Excel sheet of who needs what, and just start sharing the equipment is the way to go. And it's nice because you get the names of real people. There's usually funding can follow up behind that too, and policy even too. Any more questions before I move on to the last one here?
A little bit of discussion still on the pasture question, in terms of using controlled burns, and if so, what type of accelerant? Again, fairly specific questions, and what happens if you've got a pasture covered with pigweed or other native kind of plants. So again, I'll just throw those out to you.
Great. So that actually is a nice kind of segue into my last point, is that that I made here. Is the next step is that science is at a crossroads right now. And that's a very global perspective on it. I think that science is doing very well at a local level, but for those specific questions, I think it would actually be fairly inappropriate for me to give an answer without knowing where this is happening at, without knowing what the practices are on the farm right now, without knowing the soil health, or not soil health, but the the physical parameters of the soil, the physical context of the soil itself. Soil analysis would be great to have in hand, and that's what we start with at the Rodale Institute, and actually with the regenerative organic certification starts with is it starts from the science perspective. You take a soil test first. So if I'm going to give any advice here, and don't hold me to any of this, but the one thing I can say for sure is start with the soil test. It's always a good place to start, at least the conversations, even if you don't get anything, any answers from it per se. At least it's going to start the farmers thinking about it. And it's going to equip them in a tangible way, and give them some deeper knowledge of the land that they're stewarding. Beyond that, extension services are obviously great, and I've mentioned Xerces Society already, and they are good with plants too. I've met some tremendously smart botanists in Xerces societies. And then in RCS, I think they would be kind of my other general go-to info people. They've got wonderfully knowledgeable staffs at RCS, and some of their offshoot organizations like ATRA. Short of that, though, the Rodale Institute does provide free consulting throughout much of the Midwest, and we're the consulting services here in California, though not officially free, are generally free, and would certainly be so for any farmer who self-identified as socially disadvantaged or veteran, BIPOC. We would fold anyone like that. Granted, if you come to me with a question about pasture raised beef and you're work for Walmart, we'll charge you through the nose and won't feel guilty about it. But and at any rate, Rodale does offer the specific services. But the first thing we do, like I said, get a soil test, and then just get our boots dirty. Go out on a walk through the field. It's really would be a disservice to give advice without going out and seeing the land and talking to the landowner, the farmer, the person in charge of it, manager, farm workers, people who've got their boots on the ground. They know what's going on there, and you have to take that into consideration before you start doling out advice. All right, that's my spiel. So I'm just going to fully take questions at this point. And
yeah, we had a couple questions about the regenerative certification program. First one was, where can producers go for more information about certification? And then related to that, how much of a premium could growers expect from regenerative slash organic certification products versus certified organic and conventional production?
Great questions. The information, including all of the kind of the standards that I've been referencing, can be found on the ROA, that's the Regenerative Organic Alliance's website. I think it's called at regenorganic.org. So if you just type in regenerative organic, I think they'd probably be the first or second one to come up. But Regenerative Organic Alliance is the name of the organization, and the Regenerative Organic Certification is the specific name of the certification. And second question, premiums. Premiums don't really exist yet, which is a little bit counterintuitive because, like I said, this is a brand-driven movement largely. So there are brands out there that are specifically buying regenerative products, but the premiums would be on a very much on a case-by-case basis. Within Rodale, in fact, we were worried about that exact thing. We actually hired on a marketing coordinator to connect brands to farmers and farmers to brands, and to work out some of those price points and margins and things like that. That all said, for me as a farming consultant, my thinking is not to work for a higher margin, but rather to lower the cost of farming. And a lot of these practices, especially the cover cropping and having living cover on the ground, those, if done well, can decrease your irrigation needs and increase your fertility. And these days, with the cost of synthetic fertilizers just going through the roof, it's very realistic to think that these practices, regenerative practices, can decrease the cost of farming. So, and thus increase our margins, even if we don't have a premium that's directly associated with the regenerative organic certification. That's just my take. Like I said, there's most of my team, most everyone else is looking for specific margins, and you can certainly contact me, and I can connect you with our marketing coordinator if you have specific questions about that.
Okay, we have posted that regenorganic.org link in the chat if anybody would like to go to that site. Also, I've posted the feedback survey again. If you would make sure to please visit that before you change your tasks for today. We do have a few minutes left. If anyone has more questions, we can take those in chat, or feel free to go ahead and use the raise hand icon under the reactions icon, and you can ask your question verbally. While we're waiting, I will mention that as part of our encore series from our AgrAbility National Training Workshop that occurred last spring, we are having another webinar related to regenerative agriculture on October 13, and that's called Building Resilience into Your Farm, Let Nature Do the Heavy Lifting. That's by some of the staff members from the Missouri AgrAbility project. Again, it's an encore of the presentation they did at our in-person workshop. If you want to register for that, you can go to agrability.org and then go to the training and events link, and you'll find upcoming webinars there. And that entire series of encore webinars is available to register for. Okay, I'm looking through chat. Here's another question. The potential of reducing the cost of production is very exciting. In your opinion, do you predict this will be a key component of overall farm viability in the future, looking more on the small/medium-sized farm end?
That is great question. And I'm glad that, Kendall, it looks like that you brought that back, the small and medium-sized farms, because that's kind of one of the questions we started off with. That's where I started off with personally, as a small, medium-sized farmer. I think so. I think that's an important part, but I think there are a few other things that we didn't mention here that are not, well, they maybe are alluded to in the ROC. Maybe I'll touch on those too. And back to the diversity part. So diversity, it includes everything. Every component of it. And so someone asked a question about, a few people asked questions about weeds. And so plant diversity will take care of weeds, but another thing that's great for taking care of weeds is of different grazing animals, different species of grazing animals. And there's, once again, Savory Institute has done some really fun work around this, about how do you move different species through a pasture so that you're optimizing the health of the pasture, and not losing any of the feed value for the animals that are out there. And so it's great science, tremendous science. But there's also an agronomic component to that too, when you talk about that, those weeds that are on your fence line could be eaten by, say, goats. That the goats aren't a cost. They're not like running a flamer or running a piece of equipment. Those are a value that's getting added to the farmer, either by the farmer leasing out the space to a goat or sheep shepherd, grazier, or by purchasing the goats themselves and then reselling them, or starting up their own goat operation. So any of these are values that are added to, yes, rotational grazing, exactly. These are all values that are added to an agricultural operation that, in a regenerative context, increases our bottom lines as farmers. So the answer isn't just decreasing costs. It's not just increasing our sales price. The answer is, I think, is creating a more resilient system that functions well in drought, functions well in floods, functions well in climate diversity, and functions well in kind of social diversities as well. And one last piece, that's locally situated. We've had tremendous support from our community around here, growing things that I had no knowledge of, but the local Mixtec speakers from Oaxaca, they showed me what to plant, and they're happy to come buy it. So my costs of transportation and my costs of harvest are basically eliminated. If they're coming to the farm and picking them off the trees and just paying me a few bucks for them, or giving me a bag of blueberries, something like that.
Okay, we do have a verbal question from Karen in Portland, Oregon. Karen, I think you're unmuted. You could go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I did put something in the chat about some of the USDA programs that are just a 2-year bunch of money that they have to try and promote local networks for distribution. The focus should be for coordination of production to feed people within the region, just kind of like what Nathaniel was talking about with the crop that he grows for the local folks. But if you can think of ways you can coordinate with other producers to transport and reach markets in nearby cities, maybe to provide food for like a college campus or something like that. This is the kind of role that small farms can coordinate together and have a customer, the one-stop customer. So not only will you improve the food of the college students, but you'll sell your produce. And right now, they're looking for innovative ideas from USDA to assist in any way that they need to for you to be able to initiate these kinds of programs. It's like I said, a one-time deal, but keep an eye on that site and listen to their broadcasts, because they have stuff like that that comes up all the time. And they're now moving into systems that will allow people to either to use or to own land that's not used. So things are happening.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
I know that we're out of time, so I really thank you, Paul and Tamika, and just want to say, if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, feel free. And if I don't know the answer, I'd be happy to pass you on to the resources that I have.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Nathaniel. We appreciate all your information today. Again, we do have other opportunities for webinars if you go to agrability.org, and we are archiving the recording of this session, and we'll be letting you know when that's available. So with that, we say thank you to everyone who attended today, and we wish you all a good day.